Alright, we're back. And I have more alcohol. That's enough. Alright, where were we? Joseph pressed his mouth to Sebastian's jaw, his throat to his sternum. He knelt down as he drew his tongue lower, across the hills of Sebastian's muscular torso, feeling the way he twitched and tensed underneath Joseph's mouth as the water streamed down their skin and dripped through their hair. He kissed a trail down Sebastian's hip bone and licked along the base of Sebastian's cock, lapping up to the head and dipping his tongue against the slit there. Joseph, Sebastian growled, and he shakily pet through Joseph's soaked hair. This is what you call cleaning up? Joseph pressed his tongue along the ridged underside of Sebastian's shaft. Ridged? Interesting. Wrapping his lips around the head, slowly he swallowed down the length of Sebastian's cock. Well then, tongue drawing small circles as he took him down to the base and pulled away to breathe. You don't need to breathe, what? Sebastian grabbed at the tile walls, stiff and mouth agape with the concentration it required for him to not grab Joseph's hair and fuck into his throat. Not that he needed to. Joseph's mouth slid, agonizing inch by inch until he had taken Sebastian to the hilt again. Joseph swallowed thickly around his cock, throat clamping around Sebastian and drool coming down his lips. Joseph, Sebastian rasped, if you don't stop, I'm going to come right here. Joseph removed himself from Sebastian's cock, licking back up it and settling back onto his knees. Sebastian pulled him up, kissing him fervently. Joseph interrupted him, grabbing his arm and leading out of the showers and back into the training room with their discarded clothes. Get dressed, Sebastian said, his voice husky with pent-up frustration. He stumbled as he tried to get his clothes on quickly, and the result was sloppy, wrinkled, and the unmistakable tenting of his pants was still on full display. Joseph looked much the same. His collar was loose, most of his buttons were askew, though he'd remembered his gloves. Neither of them took the time to straighten themselves throughout, though. They left their bags and walked as quickly as they could to the waiting elevator. With a mechanical whirring, the elevator's doors closed. Sebastian pinned Joseph to the wall, holding his hands above his head. He rolled his tongue languidly along Joseph's slender neck, teeth grazing the tendons and closing gingerly at his throat. Joseph's chest heaved with uneven breath, and he shifted to grind against Sebastian. Sebastian groaned into Joseph's damp skin, pressing back against him and trailing his tongue in a hot line across Joseph's collarbone. Joseph rolled his head to allow Sebastian better access as he peppered Joseph's neck with sucking kisses. He shivered. The sensation traveled in sparking needles to his chest, tight with anticipation. Sorry, I had to.
Okay?
No, it's a Rocky Horror reference, numbnuts. Sebastian jerked against Joseph roughly and let his hands travel along his chest, coming to rest in handfuls of Joseph's ass. Joseph's mouth was warm against Sebastian's ear, making his spine tingle with Joseph's moaning litany of Sebastian and, oh God. Sebastian released Joseph's arms and held the man's chin between his thumb and forefinger, entangling their mouths in a haphazard kiss. Tell me what it is you want, Joseph. Joseph wrapped his arms around Sebastian's neck, his gloves clawing harmlessly down Sebastian's neck in rhythm with the way Sebastian ground, thick and insistent against his own erection. I want you to fuck me, Joseph said unsteadily. Sebastian slipped a hand between them and groped Joseph through the thin cotton of his dress pants, tugging along the shell of Joseph's ear and tugging the earlobe with his teeth. What was that, Joseph? Please fuck me, Seb, Joseph begged. begged, his voice trembling into a shaky sigh. I don't know what's wrong with me. The elevator opened with a loud ding, and they stumbled apart, checking both ends of the hallways to see if the coast was clear. They walked briskly to their office, avoiding any eye contact and keeping an arm's distance apart. Joseph's palm rubbed at the bulge against Sebastian's pants as Sebastian fumbled with the doors locked, tilting his head impatiently to slide their lips together. Joseph, Sebastian said between another desperate kiss. Not to seem pushy, but he pulled Joseph tight against him to demonstrate his hard urgency of their situation. Joseph made a soft sound against Sebastian's mouth. Fingers pressed against the small of Sebastian's back before he tottered backwards and turned to find the bag underneath his desk. He re-emerged and pressed a small bottle of Vaseline, oh boy, they're using Vaseline, into Sebastian's hand. Though he assumed Joseph had kept that for a more mundane reasons, the condom beside it gave him the stimulating realization that this was something Joseph had, in some miraculous way, planned for. Sebastian wrapped an arm around Joseph's waist and kissed him, tongues twining and steering him backwards towards the desk. Sebastian turned Joseph around and guided him forward so that he was bent over, torso resting on the desktop. He pet along Joseph's back and moved to unbutton his pants, fingers slipping below the loosened waistband and playing through the sparse trail of hair before he tugged the garment down to Joseph's knees. Sebastian let his hand drift appreciatively over the curves of Joseph's ass, pausing to coat his fingers with lubricant before pressing them to Joseph's tight entrance. Joseph exhaled sharply but held still as two fingers probed inside him. Sebastian worked his fingers in and out carefully, freehand petting soothing circles against Joseph's lower back. Yeah, it is oddly detailed. But hey, it's Smut! His hand moved in deep, curling his fingers experimentally and eliciting a low, quavering sound from Joseph. By the time Sebastian had playfully scissored his fingers a few more times, Joseph was trembling beneath him with the strain of staying still through the pleasurable assault on his senses. Oh God, Joseph said with a sharp breath inward. Sebastian's response was to slip a third finger into Joseph, driving them back and forth slowly. Sebastian ran his thumb along the head of Joseph's cock, smearing a dribble of pre-cum down the shaft. Joseph jerked against him, desperate for more contact. Sweat beaded along the nape of Joseph's neck and forehead, his eyes half-lidded and mouth slightly agape while Sebastian crooked his fingers deeper inside him. Sebastian's touch ghosted along Joseph's twitching cock as he worked his fingers in, making Joseph quiver and twist helplessly. Fuck me, Joseph choked out, hands balled into fists. Sebastian shoved his fingers in to the knuckle. What?
I thought he was about to piston.
Oh. And twisted. Joseph bore down on him reflexively with a yelp, clamping a hand against his mouth to stifle his outcry. Please, Joseph whispered against his fist. Sebastian spread his fingers and crooked them again, savoring the way it made Joseph shiver. What was that? Please! Sebastian felt his heart stutter, heat spreading and pooling as a tight ball of lust in his stomach. Joseph begging burned at his ears, and he slipped his fingers out of Joseph hastily undo his pants and free his cock from where it strained painfully at the zipper. Ouch. Sebastian rolled on the condom and coated himself with a generous amount of lube, sliding his cock against Joseph's ass. Joseph shifted against him, rising up slightly on his arms and looking back. Joseph was worrying his lip to a swollen pink with his teeth, breathing heavy. He took every ounce of restraint in Sebastian to not just plow in and fuck Joseph into the desk. Instead, he let himself push very slowly into Joseph, so that just the head of his cock had slipped inside. Sebastian tore the buttons of Joseph's shirt apart and felt along his chest, letting his fingers play down the fine hairs trailing down his stomach. Joseph gripped the edge of the desk and bucked back against Sebastian, hard. He felt his cock shove roughly inside the tight heat of Joseph's ass, gasping and wrapping his arm around Joseph's waist to steady himself. Sebastian breathed hard and leaned against Joseph's back, just taking in the scent of soap, sweat, and subtle traces of the cologne Joseph wore, while Joseph shuddered beneath him. Everything was heaty, taut, and pulsing from the base of Sebastian's skull to between his thighs, momentarily overwhelmed by the way Joseph's body tightened around him. "Oh God," Joseph breathed, wiggling and pulling away. Sebastian's body thrust reflexively against Joseph, bearing his cock in deep. "You okay?" Joseph bit down on his hand and nodded. Sebastian licked looping patterns against the side of Joseph's neck and rocked against him, cock rubbing in small motions back and forth inside him. Joseph whimpered and pressed back against Sebastian. "God, you're thick," Joseph rasped. Sebastian thrust into him hard. "Fuck!" Joseph's back arched and his arms shook with the force of his clenched fists. Sebastian paused and kissed the back of Joseph's neck as he squirmed impatiently against him. Joseph's voice was hoarse and labored. "Don't stop." Sebastian was happy to oblige him, gripping Joseph's ass and ramming into him. Joseph curled his fingers against the wood of the desk, drawing ragged scratch marks down its surface with each slap of Sebastian's skin against his. He worked his hips in time with Sebastian to meet each thrust. The sounds coming out of Joseph grew steadily louder with each movement, every light touch. "Quiet, Joseph," Sebastian growled, punctuating the statement with a savage thrust. He groaned and threw his head back as Joseph's body constricted around his cock, tight enough to border on painful. Joseph bit down on his hand again to stifle the increasingly needy sounds, though intermittent huffing groans still escaped. Sebastian pounded into him rhythmically, releasing his grip on Joseph's waist to stroke along his flexing back or down where Joseph's cock twitched against his stomach. Joseph could only grip the edge of the desk as his legs shook and he moved simultaneously against Sebastian. Without warning, Sebastian wrapped his arms around Joseph's waist and pulled him, falling backwards onto his office chair and hoisting Joseph up so that he straddled Sebastian's lap, back leaning into Sebastian's chest. His legs splayed awkwardly, pants still bunched just below his ass. Sebastian thrust up into him, flush against Joseph's body. Joseph gripped the arms of the chair while Sebastian hammered into him repeatedly, rising against Sebastian's chest and panting as pleasurable tension burned along his spine and between his thighs. Sebastian's hands moved to scratch lightly along Joseph's chest, feeling along his nipples and caressing his throat. Joseph jerked against Sebastian's hand when it slid down to wrap around his cock, stroking slowly in contrast to his frenzied thrusting. A tingling sensation prickled along Joseph's scalp and down through his arms, back arched and tense with the buildup of sensation. "Seb, please, I need to," Joseph whimpered. Sebastian squeezed Joseph's cock, twisting his fist with each leisurely pump and fucking into Joseph's ass with increasingly erratic, frantic motions. Joseph arched and writhed against his chest, rolling his hips and bearing down on Sebastian. Joseph came with a harsh cry just as Sebastian bit down on the top muscles of his neck and ran his tongue along the fresh teeth marks. Sebastian didn't stop, impaling Joseph on his cock with powerful, careful thrusts. Joseph's cum painting Sebastian's hand while his body spasmed and twitched fitfully. Sebastian moaned and sucked at the sensitive skin below Joseph's ear, jerking Joseph through his orgasm and milking him for every drop of cum that began to ooze down his fingers. Joseph shuddered and twisted in Sebastian's grip, his fingers clawing at Sebastian's thighs as every movement of Sebastian's fist threw another agonizing convulsion of ecstasy out of him. He wound up sagged against Sebastian, panting for breath and still stretched around Sebastian's cock. Joseph took Sebastian's hand and lifted the sticky digits to his own mouth. Sebastian's free hand grabbed at Joseph's thigh as Joseph licked the warm semen from Sebastian's fingers, sucking lightly at the fingertips and smearing the fluid across his mouth. Sebastian bucked into Joseph again, making him gasp and slip from Sebastian's lap. He fell onto his knees, pulling the condom off quickly and trailing his tongue in sloppy circles. Pulling the condom off quickly and trailing his tongue in sloppy circles around Sebastian's cockhead. Sebastian barely had time to suck the breath in through his teeth before the wet heat of Joseph's mouth encircled him, enveloping him as he took Sebastian's cock to the hilt. Joseph bobbed his head along Sebastian's length, tongue tracing haphazard whorls. What's a whorl? Along the veined ridge. He pulled off and licked a thick, wet stripe up and swallowed him back down, tongue cupping his shaft until Joseph's throat was gripping at him with a thick, choking noise. Sebastian's hand flew to curl in Joseph's hair, tugging gently while the other's hand trembled, white-knuckled against his thigh. His head was reeling, fiery silver sparks burning from his groin through his spine, the heat stealing through his limbs and making his vision swim while he watched Joseph's delicately curved mouth lick and suck at him with hungry intensity. One hand drawing his thumb along the skin folded along the base of his cock and stroking him in between breaths. Joseph, Sebastian hissed, too busy drawing in deep breaths as though he'd drown otherwise to warn his partner properly. Joseph looked up at him, all animalistic vulgarity in his eyes as the soft velvet of his tongue slipped down to the base of Sebastian's cock. His mouth engulfed Sebastian again, his breath stuttering and throat convulsing around the thickness of his cock as drool leaked down his lips and trailed down his chin. Sebastian growled as he came, his muscles trembling with the effort it took not to fuck Joseph's throat and pulling at Joseph's hair. He could feel Joseph swallow the hot pulses of cum that shot against his tongue and throat, some spilling from the corners of his mouth. That's messy.
That's a lot.
Eventually, Joseph pulled back and gasped for breath. Ropes of cum and saliva trailing from his mouth to Sebastian's skin and dribbling down. Joseph continued to stroke Sebastian, sweeping his tongue along his cock to clean up the mess. I mean, he already made a mess. He was rewarded with cum splashing in droplets against his cheek and glasses. Oh God, on his glasses. Before Sebastian reached an unsteady hand out to disentangle Joseph's hand from him, holding on to Joseph's chin and rubbing the pad of his thumb against his cheek. Joseph stayed there, leaned against Sebastian's lap and closing his eyes, somewhat dazed as Sebastian quietly stroked his cheek. Both of them heaved breath into their burning lungs until the bright red tinge left their faces and their heartbeats were almost normal. Eventually, Joseph disengaged himself, sitting back off of his knees and fumbling his pants up to cover himself. He leaned back on his hands and watched Sebastian button up his own pants and slip off the chair, settling across from Joseph on the floor. Sebastian reached over and snatched the glasses off of Joseph's face, smirking at the indignant expression it earned him. He tried his best to clean them off since his shirt was a considerable amount cleaner. Joseph's shirt was soaked in sticky patches along the hem, and cum had dried in rivulets along his exposed chest. Yeah, that's gonna require a shower.
That's gonna be hard to clean off.
Joseph fought to button his shirt, as though he could feel Sebastian's eyes on him. Sebastian handed back his glasses and wiped the heel of his sleeve against Joseph's sullied cheek, trying hopelessly to clean him up. He didn't miss Joseph's small smile when he batted his hand away. Sebastian wanted to cool down, think rational, safe thoughts, but the sight of Joseph wiping the lewd mess dripping down his chin, pearlescent liquid smeared across the leather of his gloves, made Sebastian's stomach flutter with a fresh wave of ardor. Jesus, Joseph, I had no idea you were so... Sebastian blurted out, heat spreading through his chest. Joseph winced and held his hand up, their universal silent entreaty for Sebastian to stop. His arms shook, unsteady in the aftermath of their tryst. Sebastian silenced and rested his chin in his hand, regarding Joseph carefully. Joseph paused in his futile efforts to clean himself and stared back. What? Sebastian chuckled. Nothing. You're a mess, man. Clever. Joseph slumped forward and cradled his head in his hands. Sebastian. When Joseph looked up, his expression had sunk into something like hopelessness. Sebastian's hands felt cold as fear lanced through him. He expected Joseph to say something about huge mistakes and pretending it had never happened. He couldn't stand to think of himself as one of Joseph's regrets. Joseph fidgeted with his sullied gloves. This won't be like a problem, will it? Sebastian's mouth twitched into a frown. You're awful at pillow talk, Joseph. I'm being serious. What do you mean, a problem? I mean, is working together going to be weird for you now? Sebastian blinked. Is it going to be weird for you now? I'm worried that you won't see me the same way from now on, Joseph sighed. Well, you're goddamn right about that. Joseph looked mortified and Sebastian scrambled to clarify himself. I don't mean I can't see you as a competent detective anymore. You know that's not how these things work. Just because now if you're about to get descriptive, I prefer you didn't, Joseph interrupted, flushing and staring resolutely at the floor. Sebastian leaned forward and ran his thumb along Joseph's lower lip. Hard to imagine your being that bashful with the same mouth that... Joseph's mouth quirked into a brief smile and he shoved Sebastian backward. Pay attention. To what? You were explaining how you couldn't see me the same from now on. Sebastian grinned lecherously. Yeah, all I mean is that I'm not sure how I can watch you bend over to pick something up without... Joseph clapped his hand over Sebastian's mouth. Oh my God, you really don't stop. Sebastian wriggled free, holding lightly to Joseph's forearms. His voice came low and husky. Funny. I seem to recall you begging me not to stop a little while ago. Joseph's face flushed again and he fell onto his back, throwing an arm over his face. I give up. Sebastian laughed and pulled Joseph back up. I'm sorry. I don't want this to complicate things, Sebastian. Sebastian's face fell. Look, if you're trying to tell me that this was a big mistake... Joseph went blank. Mistake? Yes, a mistake. Something you regret. Something you spend a considerable amount of time wishing you hadn't done. No, that isn't it. Sebastian looked up, surprised. He searched Joseph's shifting expression curiously, trying to figure just how many and what emotions he seemed to be cycling through as he plucked at the stitching of his gloves. Do you want to get dinner with me tonight? Sebastian sounded almost panicked. Joseph's brows knitted together. Dinner? Yes. You want to get dinner like... Yes, dinner, like that. Joseph's expression softened into a smile. Doesn't that seem a little backwards? Backwards is the only way I know how to do things. Okay then, let's get dinner. Sebastian grinned and clapped him on the shoulder. Great. One thing though. What? You really need to get changed. It looks like that's basically it, so, except, then it's just, oh, no, I'll read the rest because it's kind of funny. Joseph struggled to stand, wobbling a little and tugging at his clothes. I agree. Sebastian stood and skimmed his fingers down the small patch of Joseph's exposed skin before fastening his pants for him. Joseph grabbed onto Sebastian's shoulders almost reflexively, his breath hitching at the contact. Sebastian held Joseph's jaw and kissed him, tugging at his lower lip and tasting the bitterness against Joseph's tongue. Hey, Joseph breathed against his skin. Little self-control. We've got dinner to get to, right? Sebastian met Joseph's mouth one more time, running his tongue along Joseph's teeth before leaning back reluctantly. Yeah. Now go get cleaned up. I'll pick you up at 8. Joseph smiled and rubbed the back of his head, looking for the entire world like a teenager before prom. What? It's all just end resolution stuff. He grabbed his bag, slinging it across his shoulders, paused in the doorway. All right, I'll see you at 8, then said. Sebastian dropped into his chair as the door closed behind Joseph and pulled his phone from his back pocket. He found his text conversation with Kidman and opened it, typing furiously. Oh god, they're texting. How old are they? Hey, Jules. So, weird question. Did you get Maria flowers, or is that not appropriate? Flowers not appropriate? Sebastian, what are you talking about? I'm talking about whether or not you should have gotten Maria flowers after you nailed her. I'm confused. I never said I did any of those things. Focus on the hypotheticals. Then, yes or no to the flowers. Oh my god, you didn't. I said hypotheticals. Now, would it be weird, hypothetically speaking? Oh my god, Sebastian. Stop that. You know I'm not going to be able to come into work and look in either of you in the eye without laughing. Making an awful lot of conjectures there and still not answering me. Yeah, you know what, sure, flowers sound nice, especially if you want him to know that it's not going to screw up your working relationship and really want it to not just be a weird one-time thing after the gym. Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too. I knew you nailed Joseph! Damn it, Julie! Have to buy flowers, maybe from some. Yeah, that's it. Alright. One last thing. I don't know how long this is in. 27 minutes. God damn, these take longer and longer all the time. Okay. Bye!